All right. We're recording. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Odum and Andrea show. This is a show where myself and my beautiful wife, Andrea, get together and we go over a book written by a human that has done something pretty cool or interesting or, teaches us valuable lessons or whatever that we want to just, discuss and see if it's anything that we want to, incorporate into our lives. And today we are reading a book called In Pain, a bioethicist's personal struggle with opioids. This should be interesting because this is different. By Travis Rieder. Let me just
I don't know.
post
Is
that
it
up
Rieder or is it Rieder? I don't know.
Rieder.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would say Rieder.
Yeah.
But
long E.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Anyways.
But this is interesting. Whatever. What brought you onto this guy?
So, because some of my favorite books to read are about like the medical institution and about health and fitness and wellness and all that kind of stuff. And I saw this one. It came up as recommended when I was doing my Amazon deep dive for books.
Right.
And I find the opioid epidemic compelling and interesting to read about. And
just absolutely horrific with what the pharmaceutical company has done.
Well, and that's like a kind of a side interest for me too, because we did go through that book, Bottle of Lies, about the generic drug industry. And there's so much that the drug companies, so many bad things that they've done. And
I think there's one thing, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. Is there anything in the recent past couple of years that has happened with the pharmaceutical companies where they've made insane amounts of profits without any liability whatsoever? Has there anything like that? I don't know. It's it's all by the books. It's all clean. There's nothing suspicious going on. They've never had any issues.
Never.
Except for maybe some opioids, which we might get into.
Yes.
All right. So let's get into it. Before we do, as always, if you like any of our podcasts we do, check us out on our website, odumandandrea.com, where we have lots more podcasts and things available for you to check out. That's pretty much it. So take it away. In Pain, a bioethicist's personal struggle with opioids by Travis Rieder.
Yes.
Read by, no, you're not reading it.
I'm not reading it.
All right.
So there is a lot of books out about that document the opioid addiction, opioid epidemic, and all written from different points of view. But when I saw that it was written by a bioethicist that had been through something, I thought, well, this is going to be an amazing perspective. And what does he have to say about it?
And maybe I could just ask a quick question here.
Yes.
A bioethicist, that is somebody that is not a doctor necessarily, like a medical doctor, but is somebody that studies the ethics of biology or the ethics of like the health industry,
biology,
of medicine?
science, medicine. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. So
just the ethics around it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he is a faculty member at the Johns Hopkins Berman Institute of Bioethics, where he directs the Master's of Bioethics degree. So he's the director, but then he's also a supervisor. And then he also holds secondary appointments in the departments of philosophy and health policy and management.
Right.
And he's also at the Center for Public Health Advocacy. So when he started out his kind of academic career, he was looking at the ethics of like climate change and population. So he has a bunch of papers about that. And then once he went through the experience that he went through, then he started getting interested in how we deal with pain.
Right.
So.
And in pain, and probably not even so much emotional pain, but like physical pain, like how we manage, like, somebody broke their back or someone's going through post-op surgery or just whatever kind of physical pain.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure probably a lot of it is like, we got a pill for that.
Yeah. Yeah. So where his story begins is in 2015, and it's a couple weeks after Mother's Day. It's Memorial Day weekend. So because John Hopkins, and he just basically started his job at Johns Hopkins
in 2015.
Yes. And so he's 33 at this point, and he is he's a big motorcycle guy. Like, he's always ridden motorcycles for like a decade. And so he's getting ready to go out on a ride with a friend to do the Shenandoah Valley.
Oh, I feel like I know where this is going.
Yeah.
Motorcycles and
So
accidents. Oh.
he's married and he has a 1.5-year-old little girl. And so he's riding out to meet his buddy, and he's going down. He's going to go through an intersection. He sees a van out of the side of his eye, and this van is like kind of inching forward with his left hand turned to turn left while he's going straight.
Right. So he's in like the left turning lane.
The van.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
he sees this driver. The driver looked at him, but he was still nudging forward, and his spidey senses went off, and he's just kind of know. And so as he's looking for an escape route, the van comes out and hits him on his left side before he can do anything. It like happens so fast.
Because the van was supposed to turn left, but then for whatever reason he turns right into the.
No, Travis is going here. The van's going to turn left.
Oh,
left. I'm getting it wrong.
Well, your other left.
Other left.
But are they parallel then?
No,
or he's coming in?
He's coming in.
Right. So he's turning left and he was going straight. So they're going opposite. He wants to go straight through the intersection. The other guy wants to turn left.
Yes.
Right. And just hits him. Right.
Yeah. So he's fallen off of his motorcycle before. And so he trusted like all of his gear to like protect him, right? He has a helmet. He's not stupid. And so he lands on his back. The bike falls on top of him and hits his left leg. And he feels this intense amount of pain on the bottom of his left foot. And so he goes to take his boot off, which everyone that sees it is yelling at him to keep his boot on. Yeah. But he takes it off and immediately it's just, he feels like it's like this explosion of pain. Yeah. And his sock is just covered in blood. It was just this big shapeless mass, and it looked like
got crushed.
It looked like something had exploded outward from inside of his foot, and then there was a bone sticking out.
Yeah.
So he was only 3 blocks from home when this happened.
Is it just because his foot got crushed by the motorcycle, or?
Well, it didn't get crushed.
Run over?
It did partially get crushed, but the bone in his, I don't know how exactly it happened, but a bone pokes out the very bottom of his foot. So he has this like big hole in the bottom of his foot.
Oh man.
And so
squeamish just hearing about this.
When the paramedics come, he hears the paramedics say a potential degloving of the left foot. So think about that in your mind, about what that means.
Yeah, I don't know. It just doesn't sound good.
No. So
some things are supposed to be on the outside of your body. Some things are supposed to be on the inside. Yes. When it's reverse, we got a problem. Yeah.
And so he's in the hospital. Obviously they get him to the hospital, and he has the first 3 surgeries out of a total of 6 surgeries that he's going to have. So
6 is not, I was thinking he's going to have like a dozen or something like that.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. So the orthopedic trauma surgeon basically tells him, like, I don't know if you're even going to keep this foot. Like, I'm gonna do what I can, but I don't think it's just like, it's a salvage situation at this point. We're gonna see what we can do, but like, don't expect anything. And like, he was really surprised. Like, everyone else, his whole family knew that he might lose this foot, but like, he didn't really realize it until the doctor surgeon, actually said it. So he has these surgeries, and basically they're just trying to keep the foot alive. They're cleaning up all the obliterated bones. They're removing the shards of others. They're rebuilding some of them.
Oh my goodness.
But the main problem
Why am I feeling so queasy? So weird. Like my stomach is like turning.
I know. But the main problem, and so this is the orthopedic surgeon that's taking care of all of this. Mm-hmm. This hole at the bottom of his foot, it's like this open hole that the bones had exploded out of. And so that was going to have to be handled by plastic surgeons to deal with that.
Yeah.
Do you need a bucket?
No, just keep going. So you can
Good thing you haven't eaten anything yet today. So the first job obviously was to try and put the foot back together, and then to like close this big hole in his foot. So after the first surgery, they like let the foot rest and prepare for this like skin to skin graft. That's what they were originally going to do, is just skin graft this hole. And so this hole was packed with a sponge, and then attached to the wound they attached, it's called a VAC. And so it's a device that applies negative pressure to the wound to stimulate healing. And so every other day, the sponge had to be taken out and then a new one put back in. And it was like excruciating. Like they said to him, like, you need to make sure you take your pain medication before this happens.
Yeah.
He goes through all the different medications he's on, but yeah, they're like all opioids because this is like the only thing that's going to be really effective at like.
How long does it take to change out the sponge?
I don't know. I'm not really sure. So.
Do you remember that boxing movie with Miles Tyler, where he plays a boxing guy that got in a really bad car accident and he like broke some bones in his neck, and he was in one of those screw things where they put 4 bolts in your skull and whatever.
I don't remember that movie.
So he's one of the things, he's like, I don't take drugs like at all. So at the time when they have to like unscrew the things, which of course have calcified into his skull, the doctors are like, oh, well, we need to remove them. They'll give you medication. He's like, no, I'll just do it.
Oh, fuck that.
And then you see that like the whole scene is just like, he unscrews it, but he's like breaking the chair and just whatever. Because it's like cracks and then it screws. It's
Stop
fine.
Stop talking.
But anyways, so I'm just wondering like if it's just really like, that's like, you know, like 5 minutes of like, watch. I have no idea how long it took, unscrew 4 screws, but.
Put me out.
But yeah, I'm just thinking like, if it's going to be a couple of minutes of excruciating pain, maybe you can suffer through it and whatever. But I mean, this guy's like, you know, a boxer or whatever, so he's used to punishing pain.
So they try.
I was going to make a Goggins go joke, and he's just like, there's nothing.
Stay hard.
Stay hard.
So they try to do the skin graft thing, but like it doesn't work. So they like harvest like a layer of skin from his forearm to try to graft it to the wound, but it's when they get in there, there's so much necrotic dead tissue that it's just not going to work. It's too deep. It's not going to work. Yep. So the next surgery then that they do, it's at a world-class limb salvage center, and so what they're going to do with this one,
he's American, right?
Yeah.
So is this covered under insurance, or is he just paying for it?
He doesn't talk about that. Yeah. So this next one is called a free flap surgery. I'm not really sure why it's called this, but what they're going to do is they're going to carve out a portion of his thigh. They're going to harvest muscle, fat, skin to fill and cover the wound. They're also going to clip an artery so that they can reattach an artery to get blood flow to this hole in his foot, as well as nerve to allow sensation in this foot as well. So like it's a serious long, like I think the surgery was like 8 or 9 hours long to do this. And so this was 3 weeks after the accident. So he gets out of surgery and
he's going to be in all kinds of pain.
Yeah, like ridiculous.
Because they got to cut a huge hole in the side or whatever to get all that.
Yeah. So not only is his foot that's had the surgery on in pain, but then also like his thigh where they did all this harvesting.
I wonder if you'd just be like, you know what? If they're saying like they're going to harvest all this stuff, you'd be like, you know what? Fuck it. Just peg leg me, you know? Like, is it worth it?
I don't know. I don't know what the decision process was. He didn't talk about that too much, about this one, about the decision making that went into this. So the ICU doctors did not prescribe him enough pain meds. Like he's in so much pain, like it's unreal. And so he gets the nurse to call the plastic surgeon doctors because he's in the ICU, right? And he's just like in agony, like unreal, like it's so ridiculous.
Well, for how long? I don't understand.
Yeah, like a couple days, like a day and a half. And so then finally,
doctors coming in to say how you feeling? Be like, I'm in the most pain in the world.
But then they look at him with suspicion. He says, almost like he's like wanting more pain meds, and it's like, do you know what just fucking happened to me? What this surgery involved? And so finally they refer him to pain specialists, which that referral should have been in right away. I don't understand that, number one. And so they were like, well, what's happened is you've gotten behind the pain. And this is a phrase that doctors use quite often is don't get behind the pain, make sure you stay ahead of it so then you don't get into this agony. Because what happens is he knows how bad this pain is, and like throughout this whole journey so far. And so he gets like anxiety and anxious and this fear because he knows soon the drugs are going to wear off, and it's just like it amps you up, and then it's harder to relax and to be calm. So it's important to be ahead of that pain. And
that means drug you ahead of before it's going to happen?
Yeah, well, yeah, or just make sure you're taking your meds when you need to be at the time to take them, right? Like don't like miss a dose or something like that. And so like I was told that when I had the C-sections with the kids, is like make sure you're taking your dose on time, even though it was just Advil and Tylenol.
Yeah.
And so
don't say just, I mean, a lot of people die from that stuff. They OD on that stuff. So it's
but it's so stupid because there's different types of pain and there's different types of medications for different types of pain. So if you have neuropathic pain, so pain that's due to like
Your nerves.
you need to be taking something like a gabapentin or a pregabalin. Those are what is prescribed for neuropathic pain.
Okay.
They didn't even give him that. The surgeons didn't even give him that. So that's ridiculous to me. So they prescribed him gabapentin, but then also more like like a better selection of opioids, how they prescribe these opioids. So he finally gets some relief.
Does some of that bad prescribing of pain medication have to do with, we kind of always talk about this, how doctors are sometimes not very well versed in all the different medication options are out there, and also they have almost even no idea how these medications even interact with the body because they just don't study this kind of stuff because they're not pharmacists, they're surgeons or medical doctors, right?
So I was going to get into this later.
Okay.
But
we can get into it later.
No. We'll get into it now because you brought it up. I think it's a good spot to talk about it. He says in an evaluation of over 100 medical schools, the average was 7 hours of pain education on how to help with pain. So it's really similar to how much education they get with nutrition, right?
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
You get a
couple hours. Yeah, exactly. So in addition to this, there was a study from University of Toronto that showed that Canadian veterinarians get 87 hours of pain education. How fucked up is that?
Is that because animals, right? You can't, there's such a big push of like, you can't have animals being in pain or whatever. And it's like this big, it's like a PR. It's a PR campaign almost, right?
Yeah. So it just like ridiculous.
Yeah. That's a full month of, well, no, it's 2 weeks, like 87 hours, right? So 40 hours a week, whatever, 2 weeks of full time.
No, so it's ridiculous, the difference.
Yeah.
So that is kind of his story and his first surgeries. And so he's then sent home after he kind of recovers enough. They can send him home, and he's sent home.
From like all of his, you said he's had 6 surgeries at this point?
No, I think this is the 4th.
Okay, so he knows he's going to have
4 or 5.
More.
So he has some more coming up.
So at this point, do they know if he's going to lose the foot or not, or?
They not when they sent him home. They are hoping he's going to keep it. It's looking good that he's going to keep it. They're optimistic, but yeah. And then what type of function he gets, they just don't know, right? Yeah. They just don't know. So then he goes into like how we define pain, and because he's a bioethicist, this is obviously, we're going to get chapters like this where he actually really goes into a deep dive. And so it's interesting because pain it's so subjective, and you can look at me, or like with your back pain, right? I can't see any damage to your tissue, but there's pain there. Yeah. So he goes through that really, really well and really in depth about pain. And so the only way that we're able to quantify pain is by using that pain scale that you see in the hospitals from 0 to 10, and then it has like the happy, like the faces on it, right?
Sounds stupid, but it's like there's no other way to measure it. You can't just stick a thermometer into somebody, a pain thermometer, and be like, oh, well, here's how much pain you are. You're at 97.6,
You can't. And so the International Association for the Study of Pain says it is an unpleasant sensory and emotional experience associated with actual or potential tissue damage. Pain is always subjective. If they regard their experience as pain and report it in the same way as tissue damage, it should be accepted as pain. So basically the point is if a patient comes to you and says that they're in pain, you need to honor that and accept that they are in pain and then treat them accordingly.
Interesting.
Basically.
Is there any talk in this book about, I might be jumping around here, because this is a really fascinating subject. Is there any talk about pain being not real in terms of having any actual physiological causes behind it? Basically, can you,
like a phantom limb type thing?
Or does he talk about patients that say they're experiencing pain, but it happens to be all like psychological in their mind, like they're almost willing themselves to have pain?
He doesn't really talk too much about that. I think he does mention very briefly about like kind of that ghost limb.
Yeah, but it's not even like a ghost limb thing. Remember that story that I told you? I don't even know where I heard it, where it was like this guy kept going to his doctors for all this. Doc, I saw this pain. What are you going to do about it? And he's like, all right, well, I have this thing. we've run out of things, but this thing is like super experimental. He like drew like skulls and bones. Like this stuff is like the craziest stuff ever. Like only take one a day or whatever.
Yeah.
And the guy, he took it and he's like, I instantly felt better or whatever. And then it ended up being sugar pills.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if that's even a true story or where the hell I heard that from. Because I feel like I heard it from the radio somewhere, but maybe it's just to prove a point that maybe sometimes.
But it is all
your mind.
But it is all within your brain.
Right.
Like pain is within your brain.
I mean, I guess that's what painkillers do is they sever different connections between your nerves in your brain so that it doesn't send those signals, I guess, right?
Well,
I don't know how drugs work, but
and we'll talk a little bit about how opioids work. That's a bit different. I'm not for the neuropathic pain. Yeah, that's going to be more within the. I don't know how those ones work, and a lot of people actually don't know how they work. They just know that they work. Like mechanism of action isn't really
like from your nerves to your brain.
No, in terms of like using like gabapentin for neuropathic pain, there's a lot of these medications that are for neuropathic pain that they actually don't know.
They don't know how the drugs work. It's just one of those things that we just kind of found out that this is what it does.
This is what it causes.
There must be some kind of pathway inhibitor of some kind, but
of course there is. It's just not well known. So he says the basic tension that lies behind the ethical challenges facing pain medicine is that doctors are trained to find a biological cause and then use objective tools to evaluate the medical problems.
Yeah.
Pain is a symptom like nausea or dizziness, but you can't measure it.
Yep.
Like it's so difficult.
That's why it's such a challenge, I guess.
Yeah. So when he says like, because they would ask him in terms of his pain, how he was feeling. And he thought it's so arbitrary. Like what a 10 in pain, number one, how could I even label pain a 10? Like, how do I know when I get to a point where I can't take any more? Like, how do I label that? And then how do they know, like maybe my 10 is someone's like 5 because everyone has different pain tolerances. So he's like, he had a hard time understanding it.
Well, it's true, but I mean, that's all you can do is like when we talk about the workout scale, like 0 to 10, like what
perceived.
Yeah. And I remember, I think I asked you, I'm like, what's yours? Oh, like I'm a 10. I'm like, are you though? Yeah. Like, could you do this more flat out, whatever? It's like, oh yeah, well, you know what? Maybe it's kind of like I'm at a 7 or 8 or whatever, right? Because you're like, well, I'm not pushing so hard where I'm not, whatever, right? So yeah, it's like 10 on the pain scale would be like, I literally can't do anything else but like lay on the ground screaming in pain, like that to me is like a 10. But
and so he got to that 10 that night of his free flap surgery. He was in so much, and so he was like trying to contextualize his pain based on like what he had perceived before and then assign it a value, right? And so he says, my assigning some value to my own pain tells the doctor very little about how she or anyone else would evaluate my pain, but the scale gives us a way to start to contextualize our own pain experience.
Right.
So regardless of the subjective amount of pain, it's what it is for you. So, and then you're treated based on what they're saying.
Right. Also, it has nothing. Does he do anything about trying to bring context to other people or what the pain is? Like say like, hey, for me is like stubbing my toe or like hitting my thumb with a hammer. Like, because at least some people kind of relate to that. So like, okay, well, I kind of know how that feels.
Yeah, I think maybe that's what he was trying to do for sure. He said that he never reported a pain below 3, and his rule was that if he was a 5 or below, he wouldn't ask for pain meds. He'd just try to get through it on his own. So, but that first night, so he had a dose of oxycodone, which oxycodone is, it's like Percocet or OxyContin. That's the other word.
Are those just like the actual brand names of the drugs?
Yes.
It's all the same, exact same drug, which is oxycodone?
Oxycodone.
Oh, oxycodone.
Yeah,
okay.
And so it is, to put it into perspective, it's 1.5 times the effect of morphine.
Okay. Morphine is what they give you, like when you've been shot kind of thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And so then fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine.
What?
Yes.
100 times.
Yeah. That's why it's so dangerous.
So yeah, I know nothing of fentanyl. I just hear it obviously in the news, like fentanyl overdose. So 100 times stronger than morphine.
Yes.
Or 100 times stronger than
morphine.
Okay, not that was one. That was 1.5.
Oxycodone.
Okay, so
OxyContin.
Okay, because if it was 100 times more than that, that'd be like 250 times the other one. Anyways, I don't know. Mm-hmm. That is insane.
Yeah.
So, are they based on the same? Like, are these completely synthetic drugs?
So
or are they based on plants?
So oxycontin is, sorry, just let me get to.
Because aren't opioids a part of like the heroin?
So yes. So what makes something an opioid is its molecular relationship to the opium poppy or to the body's opioid system. So we have opioid system. So it, like the endorphins, we have receptors for endorphins.
That's why they work on us.
And so that's what opioids are fitting into. And
Right.
so not only are they relieving pain, they're also giving us a euphoric effect,
Right.
which is the high that people get.
And that's what people get natural highs when they're like exercising or
exactly
experiencing
having
something
sex.
joyful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And so those are our endogenous,
our natural ones.
our,
Yeah.
and the endorphins.
Well, that's why it's really cool when you look at drugs and how they're developed in natural worlds. It's like it's finding something that works within our own biochemistry that just happens to enhance other things too, because they have to in order. Like we have to have a receptor to be able to accept like a drug. So it's like it's always based on the natural world. It's really interesting.
It's really interesting. Yeah. And so with opium, it's like poppies create this milky liquid. It's dried into a powder, and then that's what people have used for like thousands of years.
Is it like a poppy? Again, all I know is like Ozark, but you never actually see it. Is it just like a poppy, like the poppy you wear on Remembrance Day? Just a red poppy?
Yep.
So those are opioids, or that's heroin.
Yep.
And they grow naturally places?
Of course. Yeah. People have them in the gardens.
And you could make heroin?
I don't know if you can. I don't know if you could. Yeah. So, but then obviously over time, people were experimenting, chemists were experimenting with stuff, and they were able to isolate those, the active compounds, the alkaloids, and then create things like morphine and codeine, which we use for pain relief. So,
okay. And so now let's get on to fentanyl. What the hell is that?
So I actually don't know, because he doesn't get too much into how fentanyl, like what fentanyl's,
like what they
where
are?
it's derived from. Yeah, I'm not.
Because I wonder if they're like hitting the same receptors that heroin and.
Well, it would. It would. Yeah, it still is going. It's an opioid, and it's still acting on those opioid receptors. It's just that much stronger than.
So I wonder if then it sounds like it's probably synthetic, but yet following the same type of whatever molecular formula to.
Yeah. So it was. So it was first made in 1960.
Is it like, again, this is, I should stop
and it
this.
It is synthetic. Yes, it's synthetic.
Right.
Yes. Yep.
So I was going to say, so it's something like, again, Breaking Bad, right? Like it's methamphetamine. It's just like something you could just make it anywhere. You just have to have whatever.
I don't know.
Compounds to make.
I don't know, to be honest.
So when you have all these fentanyl overdoses, is it because the fentanyl itself is so toxic, or is it because they're like spiking and lacing it with other stuff?
Because they're lacing it, and the people that are taking it don't know that it's in there, and so they think they're just taking an opioid, and so they take too much, and then that's how you OD.
But they think they're taking an opioid, but there's fentanyl in it?
Yep.
But I thought you can't overdose. Okay, so fentanyl is very dangerous then.
100%.
Okay, so the fentanyl itself is what's killing people, not
Yes.
the fact that they don't know they're taking fentanyl and it's laced with like some shit drug that's making it toxic.
They're taking like oxy or heroin,
right?
And it's laced. The heroin is laced with fentanyl.
So what the hell is fentanyl used for? Just super crazy pain management?
Yep. So when I was at the pharmacy, people would come in for fentanyl patches. And so the patches were like a slow release of the pain medication over time.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Of fentanyl?
Yes. And so what was even crazy about that was it was a patch exchange. So they had to give us their old patches in order to get the new ones.
Right.
That's how crazy it's regulated.
Which I guess it should be.
Yes.
And I guess fentanyl is just super addictive.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, so
It's like if morphine works really well, why do you even need to have something that's 100 times more effective?
I don't know. We're humans. We fuck around with shit and trying to make things worse. So, but the main problem with opioids as well is that
the main problem, but yeah,
is so that it also sedates your body systems. So it makes you sleepy, and it also slows down your respiration system. And so this is how you die from it: is you take too much, and it just completely
it shuts down your body.
It completely slows down your respiration. So then your blood oxygenation level drops really, really low, which is obviously not good.
So is it they kind of die of asphyxiation?
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah. Something like that. So I don't think asphyxiation. I don't think that's what you would call it.
Well, it's just like a lack of oxygen.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
Cardiac
really
arrest. Yeah. It's probably lots of things.
exactly. So he talks then about, he calls it kind of like the pendulum of pain management. And this was such a fascinating chapter because it goes really deep into the history of how we have managed pain and where we are today and why we got here. And so he talks about how back in the Civil War in the States, they were aware of the addictions of painkillers because there was things like opium dens like all over the place. But they knew about that the pain relieving effects also of these opioids were really like unparalleled.
Yeah.
And so the holy grail then of the pharmaceutical manufacturing company became to have a non-addictive opioid. And so it kind of goes back and forth. In 1898, the Bayer company actually was able to
Bayer.
Yes, they actually found heroin, and it was really similar to cocaine because they just fucking put heroin in everything. They put it in cough syrups, they put it in pills, drops, elixirs, like all of this stuff, and people could just buy it over the counter. You don't need a prescription for it. It's like it was not regulated at all. So then finally in 1908, and like addiction was rampant, obviously, with this stuff. So in 1908,
people are buying cough syrup left, right,
yeah.
center.
So then in 1908, FDR appoints America's first opium commissioner, who said that Americans had become the greatest drug fiends in the world, and this is 1908.
Yeah.
So then,
when was heroin like invented or found out?
1898.
1898.
Yeah.
Because you were saying stuff in the Civil War.
They used it in the Civil War as well, just opium.
But the Civil War, opium.
Opium, yeah,
but
not heroin.
Okay, but that's opium. So when was opium found out to be like a painkiller then?
Like thousands of years ago, because they used it in China, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, there was like opium dens.
I don't know.
It was a big thing. There was opium dens, and that was even part of the British taking over part of China. They got them addicted, or they encouraged the opium use.
Okay.
So, but anyways, Bayer discontinued heroin manufacturing in 1913 because they had aspirin as their blockbuster drug. So they didn't need heroin anymore. And then heroin, it wasn't with this new commissioner, it was being really tightly regulated. So they weren't going to make any money from it. And then in 1924, it was officially outlawed. You weren't allowed to have it. And their addiction was treated as a criminal matter now, not a medical one.
So you're not allowed to have heroin, not opioids.
Opioids weren't a thing yet. This was in the early 1920s.
Okay.
So it wasn't really a thing.
Opioids.
Yet. Yeah.
Okay.
Wasn't really a thing yet. Heroin was the main.
So they were just taking, because heroin's it's like, do you take opioids and then process that to make heroin? Is that how it works?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just not sure the drug process, but anyway, okay.
So then that heroin use obviously was driven underground, and people were treated criminally for it. And so the stigma was attached. These people are criminals. They can't control themselves. That's awful.
But they knew the reason they got rid of it was because it was addictive. And now they're saying that they can't control themselves and like it's their fault. Ah.
Yeah. So then the pendulum kind of swings back, and medicine comes out, and it's just like, well, we need strong pain relievers for end of life care, for cancer, for surgery,
all kinds of things.
all kinds of things. And so they knew that opioids were the most powerful, and so the kind of medical thinking kind of turned, and so in the 70s and 80s they started to ramp up using opioids and using to help pain relief for these specific set of circumstances. But then they were questioning, well, if we can treat this kind of pain, like why are these other patients, why do we let them suffer, right? So that was the new kind of question. And so then there was a couple, he really goes into it, but basically there was a couple papers that were put into high-ranking journals that were talking about that it's not actually that addictive. Some of these medicines aren't actually addictive, and we need to be treating this pain. And so brought to you by
Pfizer.
On its own, that it wouldn't have gotten to the point it is today, except all of these things kind of came together to make a perfect storm, because now Purdue Pharma comes out with its new wonder drug called oxycontin. And so Purdue had a patent on MS contin, and what that was extended release morphine. So Oxycontin is for continuous. So it's a
Okay.
continuous release of morphine. So
For like 8 hours or whatever, as long as
12
you
hours, something like that. Yeah.
take in a pill form.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but in the early 90s, that patent was going to expire. So they needed a new drug.
Yep.
And so what they did was they applied that same continuous technology to oxycodone. And so in 1996, OxyContin was released. So because
in 1996.
Yes.
So that patent, 1996.
Yes.
So you get 20 years usually, right?
Something like that.
So 2016.
Yeah.
Off patent.
So Purdue Pharma, there's a really great book. I haven't read it, but it's called Empire of Pain, and it goes deep. It's a huge deep dive into the whole, and I've read a little bit about it in the Bottle of Lies. She goes into a little bit about this company, Purdue Pharma. It's a privately owned company by this family called the Sackler family. And
I was going to ask, I never heard of this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've heard the name, but they're not part of the Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson,
no,
these
they're
publicly
private.
traded companies.
They're private. And so what happened is they, on their label for OxyContin, they were like, what they said on the label was delayed absorption as provided by OxyContin tablets is believed to reduce the abuse liability of a drug. And so the whole marketing thing about this was only 1%, less than 1% of patients become addicted to this.
Yeah. And are these, is like a private company beholden to the same regulations as a
Yes.
public company?
However,
Yeah. Well, they don't release any of their data.
so just let
Because at least with a public company.
Well, they still would have to release their data to the FDA to get it approved.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what happens. So what happened is the FDA has to approve that claim, any claim made on a label of a medication.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they had no data to suggest that this was a thing. There was no data. There was no research done to suggest that it was not addictive.
So how the hell did it get approved?
Because
Someone's getting paid.
Yep. So the FDA regulator, they were like, oh, how much are you making? Well, maybe, once you're done at the FDA, maybe you could come work for us and we'll give you this much money.
Mm-hmm.
So that's exactly what happened. Exactly.
Unbelievable.
What happened. Yeah.
Like,
so, yeah.
should a person like that be tried as like a mass murderer?
100%. I believe so. You have culpability. 100% you do. So, but the reasoning for what they were marketing this was because it's a continuously released medication over 12 hours, this is what is going to prevent people from trying to continually kind of get that high. So that's what they're like, it's released slowly over time. It's less rewarding. There's not a sharp increase in the pain. So it's not one of those habit forming things. That was their claim.
Right.
But two things undermined this. Number one is the pain relief rarely lasted for 12 hours. It wasn't this big, long thing. Mm-hmm. So they would have to take it earlier or take something else earlier to help with the pain while they were waiting for their next dose. And then also, if you crushed up the pills, you could snort it or mix it with water and get that immediate high.
Instant.
Yeah. So not only
just more surface area or whatever.
Yeah. So not only that, they made these huge, massive dose pills of like 80 milligrams and then this mega pill of 160 milligrams. Like these are huge for pain relief medications. So it was just kind of a perfect storm. And not only that, then they went crazy with their marketing schemes. And so they had all of these salespeople go out. They sponsor, like trying to push this on doctors. They had extravagant pain management conferences for people or for doctors. Then they would even look at, well, what doctors are like prescribing the most pain medication? Let's go and find those people.
Right.
They had all that data. They were able to find it. And so the thing is the
bring them all up into their conferences or their yachts.
So, and so the sad thing was, though, is the most people that are being prescribed pain medication are people that have very physical jobs. And like the people in Appalachia who have...
Sorry, where's
Appalachia? So it's like West Virginia, that area. Coal miners,
right.
farmers, all these people. And so now you see this epidemic happening in small rural towns rather than the big city. So it's a whole new epidemic. So
and because it's rural, no one gives a shit about those people. Fuck.
So in 2001, Purdue paid annual bonuses averaging $70,000 for their salespeople and up to $240,000 per person.
And that's just the bonus.
Yep. And overall, it was 40 million in bonuses just that 1 year. So they were even giving bonuses for like how many pills you could sell the doctors or get to the doctors.
And so when these and this is for the one, what's the company called again?
Purdue.
So like, does the way it works is that, okay, the drug's approved. So then like a salesperson literally goes to here's like,
yep.
They're just like, okay, I'll buy like, 10,000 pills.
I'm not sure exactly how it works, but yeah.
Because I guess it's different in the States. Like here in Canada, you have to get a prescription from a doctor because doctor doesn't have any of the pills. Then you have to go to a pharmacist to fill it.
No, so it was, so yes, doctor's still there. It's same as anywhere else, but it's like prescribe our medication. Because that's
right. Okay, so they don't actually.
They're the doctors are the gatekeepers.
Of course they are.
It, right. So if they don't prescribe your drug, then it's not going to be purchased at the pharmacy.
So they know, because obviously there's a record of who's prescribing, what they're prescribing, and then when they get it filled out at a pharmacy or wherever. Right. Okay. So okay.
And so another book that goes again really deep into this and how this works. It's called Dopesick, and so I didn't read the book, but it also is an HBO TV series with Michael Keaton. So I got you to get that for me. Okay. But I couldn't. I have a hard time watching that.
Oh, right. That's the one you made me.
Yeah, but I did
legally obtain from legal sources.
And so I did watch. She had the woman that wrote Dopesick and the guy that I think produced the TV series. They were on Megyn Kelly, and I did listen to that. And it was really interesting.
It's so depressing. Yeah. Like to watch this stuff and even to read this. I'm just like,
I know.
Because anyways.
Yeah.
I'll reserve comments here when we.
So there's a lot of stuff. Like Purdue Pharma was eventually fined. So in 2007,
but who cares? They've already made their billions and billions of dollars. And you're fined $50 million. Yeah, who gives a shit?
So in 2007 they were fined for $600 million. But they were fined. There was another litigation that went through with them, and they were fined. I don't know. It was some sort of amount of billions of dollars that they had to pay, that they were fined, but it was like over 9 years. So then someone figured it out, and they were like, well, of course they're gonna hold that money and get interest on it. And so they were making money even though they had to pay this fine.
And they probably made more money than what the fine was originally.
Not only that, the family itself, they took out money and put it into somewhere where no one could touch it, and then I think the company filed for bankruptcy, so they're not allowed, no one's allowed to sue them again. Basically.
This Purdue Pharma?
Yeah.
Are they still running?
Operating? I'm not sure. But they're safe.
But that's the thing. Like if you're like, oh, I want to apply for bankruptcy, one of the first things that the lawyers do is like, okay, what are your assets? Like, oh, did you just recently transfer a large amount of funds, whatever, and then file bankruptcy? Well, you know what? That's not protected. How the hell do they? Again, they got lawyers. They got all kinds of things.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways.
So anyway, it's just a big.
And the thing is, it's like they knew. They probably, of course, they knew that their stuff was addictive. It was like, you know what? This is a chance to make a shit ton of money. Yeah. So they pay off the FDA person, and you only have to pay off one person, right? This is one person that makes the approval.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Man.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So it's just one big shit show. And so like this is where he is in the middle of all of this shit happening. So what happens to him then is, so his accident happened in May. In mid-July, he goes to the orthopedic surgeon for a follow-up appointment, and he's telling his doctor how he's been able to come off some pain meds. And the doctor is like, well, how much are you still taking? And he tells him, and he's like,
oh shit.
He's like, you need to get off of this. And he was like shocked, like he was happy with how he was doing, trying to get off of them. And he's shocked that the doctor was just like kind of treating him like this. Like, well, I didn't know. So,
like he didn't know this was like highly addictive and highly.
No one had told him anything.
And it's just the addictive process of it that's so bad, right?
Well,
because there's other stuff too that it does to your body.
Yeah. So, and so then he goes to the plastic surgeon as well, because the other problem is he has so many different doctors, and the plastic surgeon's like, yeah, like you need to get off of this. And so he's like, well, how do I get off of it? And so he gives him this plan of within a month to taper down,
to
get off of it. Well, this is really bad because your body becomes dependent on it.
Right.
And so the taper he gives him is so aggressive.
Even if it's a month.
It's
that's too aggressive.
It's so aggressive.
It also depends on how long you've been taking it for as well, too.
100%. But not only that, he's also on gabapentin. So he says to him, well, should I be tapering off the gabapentin too? And how is that going to interact with everything else? And the doctor's like, oh, it doesn't have any effect. Well, completely false. It does. So the first night he drops his first dose, that's exactly when the withdrawal starts. And what happens, and so he's determined to kind of keep doing the taper. Yeah. So each week he has to taper down and down and down. And so it's like, this was the worst thing. This was the worst thing he had gone through with this whole injury and everything. This was absolutely the worst. He had nausea. He had insane depression. He's like, the only reason I didn't kill myself basically was because of my daughter and my wife that I had them to live for. And he said it was as if I had a fire in my core and it would spread to my limbs, causing them to twitch and kick. He couldn't sleep, sounds
like going through crazy withdrawals. You seen like movies.
It was unreal, like what was happening to him. Like it was worse. His description of it was definitely worse than the accident that had happened. So his wife is like, what the fuck? Like they're calling the doctors saying like, this is what's happening. And they're like, well, I just tell him to go back on his doses and then maybe he can try going down later. And so Travis is just like, I'm not going through this again. Like I'm sticking this out because I can't go back and go through this again.
Or maybe try to taper off a little bit slower.
They didn't even say that to him. That's what I would have done. Right. If it had been me, I would have been a slower taper.
Yeah.
And so then, what did they do? And so then he finally calls, like they call every doctor, every clinic they've been to. No one knows what to do. No one knows who to refer him to. No one knows. And it's like patient hot potato. Nobody wants to deal with this. Yeah. And so finally they say,
this is like 2016. Nobody wants to deal with it.
Yeah. And so finally they're just like, they are like, well, maybe you need to go to this addiction clinic. And he's like, no, like I'm not addicted to it. I don't want it. It's just my body's dependent on it and I need to get off of it in a safe way.
But isn't that what an addiction clinic helps you to do? Do they think the addiction is like mental? Like they're wanting to,
so
do you know what I mean?
He goes through he talks very clearly about the difference between addiction and dependency. He had no type of addiction to it. He wasn't addicted to the high. It was his body was dependent on it, and that's what the problem is.
So are these terms used in society then interchangeably? Because I think that's what
I think so.
I do as well too, and that is a very good distinction. You're dependent on it, you need it, but you don't want to take it. How do you differentiate the two?
Because addiction, it's like a behavioral habit.
But isn't your behavioral habit formed by, what was the other one?
Physiological dependence
is
different than a habit.
But if you're physiologically dependent, that forces you to take something. Because it's like, oh, I don't want to, but my body needs it, so I'll take it. Because
you're not chasing a high. He wasn't chasing a high.
But he's chasing not to get a low.
He's chasing not to have withdrawal symptoms.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which can feed into, again, people like him would become addicted if they went back on it because they didn't want to have those withdrawal symptoms.
That's what I mean, yeah.
It does eventually, but for him, he wasn't willing to go back on it to avoid the withdrawal because he just didn't want to be on them anymore. Right. And he didn't want to have to go through that withdrawal. Like it's a vicious cycle.
Well, I know I think it's like to me in my mind they feed off of one another, but yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, and I totally get the difference.
And then this goes to, we'll talk about it in a minute, but this goes to the different types of opioid epidemics that are occurring right now. So finally he gets to the end of the taper and it's like every time he tapers off, the symptoms just get worse.
Yeah. And like you start to feel better a little bit once he's at this new level.
Maybe like
that's because he doesn't give enough time. He probably should have been, it was a month. He probably should have done it in 2 or 3 months or something like that.
More. Yeah.
And you go from like 100 milligrams to like 90 and 80 or not from like 100 to like half.
So fun. It was like a quarter. That's how it was, a quarter
yeah. So maybe like 10% instead of 25%.
Yeah. And so what happens is, so this last one, he's at the point where he can't take it anymore. And so finally he agrees. He says to his wife, okay, go fill this prescription. But then before he takes it the next day, he finally starts to feel better. So just in time before he went back on. So it was just really lucky.
Back on, as in like take a higher dose?
Yeah. Or go back on. Because he, at this point, he was like off of them. So he wasn't taking anymore.
He's off completely.
He was off of them completely. Yeah.
For how long? Do you know?
It was like 6 days until he started. And then the next day he felt better. It took about a week. So yeah. So then at this point, he was no longer at risk for losing his foot, and the tissue was alive, but now it was about how much function he was having. So they put him,
physio.
Yeah. So they put him in like a boot that was kind of like a rocker, so he could try with a cane, try like walking on it and stuff. And so he would go through, like progress and through with the boot and the physio and all that stuff. And he's like, yeah, the physio that's bad,
painful too.
Yeah. So over the next few weeks, once he got his boot, he felt like immense gratitude for everyone that had helped him. But then he became really angry because he was basically betrayed by the people that were supposed to be helping him. And so he says, what began to feel so wrong about my experience of pain management was how unconcerned my doctors were about such a serious and predictable harm.
Yeah.
And basically no one knew whose responsibility he was. Like he was...
for the addiction or dependency.
For the pain medication.
Yeah. It's like the doctors is funny because they're so quick to prescribe. Oh, just take this, blah, blah, that's all good. And then when there's stuff happens, like, whoa, it's not my problem.
Yeah. And so once he was able to get some distance from it, he was taking a more intellectual interest in it. And he's like, after all, I'm a bioethicist. And
start doing some research on this.
Yeah. And so the question was, does my individual experience provide insight into broader problems in medicine? And of course it does. Of course it does. And so
there's millions and millions of people that are going through the same thing.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading because we went through about dependence versus addiction. And so addiction, the structure of the brain changes. And so then what do a person values? So it's like people, obviously get estranged from their families. They lose their jobs because it's like the 3 C's: craving, compulsion, and lack of control that make you, because you're so addicted to this medication that everything else goes by the wayside. So that's how it's different. It's like a habit forming.
Yeah, thing. but it's you're saying that you can have the same drug and somebody's addicted, but the other person isn't addicted. They're dependent. Because
it's not only dealing. It's not just like, I think the addiction piece of
it's
it.
Like the emotional state that happens.
And like
with it.
For him, like number one, it's about genetics. There's people that are predisposed to become addicted more than others.
Are they predisposed to become addicted or predisposed to become chemically dependent?
Probably both. Could be. I'm sure there's genetics for both of it, right?
Yeah.
But there are. Not only that, I forget the guy's book. I think it was Johan Hari was talking about, I forget the book's name. Talking about the sense of community and how community is really important and the environment is important in people being more susceptible to becoming addicted.
Right.
And so even, I don't know if you've heard, it's a Canadian study with the Rat Park. Have you heard of this one?
I don't know.
So what they did was everyone's heard of that study where like you put like heroin or something or cocaine in a rat's cage and they press a button and they'll just do that until they die, right?
Yeah, because they get more. Yeah.
But if you put them in an area where there's a lot of stuff to interact with, there's other rats they can play with, they don't take as much. So that's, and it's the same, right, there's been other studies with people. So also one of the problems with this withdrawal management is that doctors see opioid withdrawal as uncomfortable, but not fatal. So if you taper off of opioids, you're not going to die. He didn't die. It's not fatal. It's uncomfortable. They don't know. Some doctors obviously don't know the extent of it. But if you're tapering off something like benzodiazepines, like what Jordan Peterson had, if you don't, tapering off that, you could be fatal.
Is that some variant of an opioid?
No, benzodiazepine is a different medication. So I don't know 100% the ins and outs of it, but that one you do have to be really careful tapering it because the patient could die for sure.
And he said he probably shouldn't have had that, or he wouldn't have he'd never take that again.
He didn't take any benzos. No.
I thought he did.
No, just opioids. No.
Oh.
I'm just saying how
Peterson,
doctors view it. Sorry, say that again.
Jordan Peterson.
Yes.
He took that benzo.
The benzos.
I'm just asking if he regrets taking it.
100%.
Yeah, because he didn't know. He didn't know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, so sorry, I'm just going to get, and so again, it's like the stigma of addiction and how we treat people with addiction explains why it's undertreated. Because like doctors don't know what to do. Like they're like, are you just like addiction seeking to try and get this medication? And they just don't know what to do with these people as well. So, and then he also says, obviously, like we were talking about, he has so many different doctors. And so just to give you an idea, he was a patient of 3 different hospitals with 12 doctors, and he had 5 surgeries in 5 weeks. So that's insane.
That's a lot.
Like that's insane.
A lot of different opinions and voices.
Yeah. And so he talks about kind of his goal in looking at this, and he says, like, he doesn't name the hospitals, he doesn't name the doctors, because he's like, that's not my goal.
He's not trying to throw them under
He's
the
just
bus.
like, the goal is to fix something that's obviously broken, and that is easier done through understanding rather than retribution, which I think that's pretty huge.
Yeah.
So, and then he says prescribing opioids and then leaving patients to fend for themselves is not merely not helping, it's causing an accident and then leaving the scene.
Yeah.
So it's like surgeons do cause predictable harm. You know, you go and you do surgery, but it's in an effort to fix something else.
Yeah.
And so,
but then they create another problem.
And so it still gives you responsibilities, because you have to look at like infection care afterwards, right? So they're concerned about infection.
So they're saying this should almost be another branch.
Exactly.
But it's not right now.
What do you mean, like another?
Like if a doctor is going to prescribe opioids, there should be a plan in place with that patient of how they're going to get them off of it.
Yes.
But it seems like there's not. It seems like a doctor will go in.
No.
Here's your 30-day prescription.
Yep.
See ya.
Yeah, just like antibiotics, right?
Right.
They'll prescribe you an antibiotic so that you don't get an infection after surgery. There's usually no complications with antibiotics.
Yeah, you just take it.
But if there are, they know how to deal with them. But with opioids, prescribing for pain, there's no end game to it.
So it shouldn't. I guess maybe this comes down to the whole system itself, and there's not enough capacity to deal with this. But like if someone's on opioids, it's like you almost need to check in daily or weekly. It's like, how's your pain now? Do you think you could start taking less of it or whatever? And like really figure out how can you as quickly as possible get off this pain, because it seems like for the most part it is kind of essential.
Yes.
You know, to deal with pain.
Yes.
But the ramifications are so dangerous.
Yes.
That it needs to be really
considered deeply.
Considered and also integrated into the whole recovery plan.
Yes. Yeah. And there needs to be a plan for it. So, and this is where he is when he needs, I think this is his final surgery. And so what happened was when he did his free flap surgery, his foot is still pretty deformed and it doesn't properly fit into a shoe.
Is there a picture of this
like
in
this.
there?
No, there's no.
Did you try looking it up on the internet?
No, I don't.
I kind of want to see.
So,
after everything's all said and done.
No. So he would also have to take, like, it'd be really painful. So he'd have to go back on opioids for this surgery.
Right.
So he goes to the orthopedic surgeon and.
Would it be better to go on fentanyl? Like, where does fentanyl fit into all this? Like,
I don't know.
You know,
I am not sure when and where doctors use fentanyl. I would.
But you know that people are getting it like a patch.
I don't know why though. That's patient confidentiality. I don't know why. So,
right.
But usually like end of life care is when you would probably use fentanyl. I can imagine.
What are the things that they give to like astronauts or whatever to like?
I don't know.
You die. It's like cyanide. You will hear that.
I think probably a cyanide pill. Yeah. So he goes and he talks to the orthopedic surgeon, and the orthopedic surgeon is like, yeah, you don't need this surgery. Like, it's just for cosmetic purposes. Like, you don't need it if you don't want it, because that's what he's worried. He's not about not wanting the surgery. It's like not wanting to have to go on the pain meds after the surgery. Right. So then he goes to the plastic surgeon who's going to be doing the surgery, and the plastic surgeon is like, no, this is not cosmetic. Like, you need this because if you don't have it, your foot can't fit into a shoe, so it's going to affect how you're walking, and then obviously like that can lead to other issues like hip issues and stuff, right? So he's so fucking done. He's just like, you two doctors need to talk to each other and figure out if this is what I need to have and give me a plan, because this is what happened to me and I'm really concerned about this pain. So not only that, he consults a pain doctor at Johns Hopkins, because that's where he works, and they come up with a plan for his pain management.
Lucky for him, he works at a place where he can get help. Like, most of us plebs don't have that kind of system.
Exactly. So he does go on Percocet, which is a type of opioid. But he's on it for such a short time. He says no matter how bad the pain was, it was never as bad as the worst moments of withdrawal, and that was my motivation. So,
right. Yeah. So it only took a little bit when he needed it. You know, maybe enough to fall asleep, kind of thing. And
exactly. So even himself, he was like, it's such a stigmatizing thing to have this dependency, even though it wasn't like not like a full on like addiction. He didn't tell a lot of people about what happened. Only a few family friends and like close family knew about what had happened. And so
like his whole like 1 month withdrawal and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so eventually he starts writing about it and researching everything. And I guess at Johns Hopkins, they have something, I forget what it was called, but it's something where you can kind of present research that you're just kind of working on or thinking about. And then you can have your colleagues kind of help you out. And
almost sounds like
a brown bag.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. I was thinking like a hackathon that people have like at companies, like, oh, what are you working on? And just kind of throwing stuff together.
Exactly.
Before you know it, maybe it sticks, and that's where something. Yeah.
So he decides this is when he's going to tell his story. And so he called it Prescription Opioid Withdrawal and Physician Responsibility. And so his main thesis was a physician who prescribes medication with predictable and harmful side effects is obligated to work to mitigate these side effects, or at least to ensure that the patient has access to someone who will work to mitigate these side effects. So
business opportunity is like, is there any kind of clinics that do this? Like hey, you know, imagine if there was a place where you just, all right, you're on opioids because you had a pain, you had surgery, whatever. You're going opioids. Go to this clinic. Yeah. They're gonna help you.
I'm not
get
sure.
Through that.
I'm not sure.
That seems like a great, like a nonprofit organization to do that kind of work.
But even these addiction clinics he was talking about that they were telling him to go to, you had to have been addicted for like a really long period of time. Like his like dependency was not long enough for them to even put him on a wait list. And then there's like a crazy long wait list for this stuff.
Well, right. So, but this is different too, though. Like I'm talking about, that's the addiction versus the dependency, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like there needs to be a dependency clinic, or not even it's just like, this is where you just send this is where you send the outpatients. Like they're not in the hospital anymore, but they're taking opioids. Here's people you can consult with of how to taper things off. I don't know. This seems like before people get to the point where they become addicted. Yeah.
And so he gets some amazing feedback from his colleagues, and the one says like,
because they're all doctor colleagues too, right?
Yeah, and he's like, the one says like, your story is so important. Like people need to hear it because it's just so important.
People need to read this.
Yeah, because it personalizes it, and it shows like he's not a junkie or anything like this. And these people that get addicted, like they're not bad. Like we have to stop criminalizing it. And I've always said this.
Well, like all drugs.
It's a medical issue. Yeah. It's not a criminal issue.
Well, but
it becomes a criminal issue.
Well, when you're stealing and whatever.
But addiction in and of itself, we have to have compassion and empathy for these people.
Yeah, that's why like the whole war on drugs or whatever. Like, again, I'm not saying drugs should just be sold at grocery stores or whatever and should be like easily accessible. No, but it needs to be given in a way. Yeah, like I don't know what the solution is.
Okay, well I'll tell you.
Oh, what the solution? Okay.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Well, I'm just saying like it needs to be regulated in a way that people can get it in a safe place, and if they are doing it so that they are addicted, they need to be, I don't know, whatever it is. Like I was saying, some kind of place where you can go, where you can get the help that you need to help fight your addiction or whatever. Anyways, I'm just rambling.
So he goes into and he says, for a solution, we need to do two things. Number one, doctors need to be allowed and required to treat pain based on their best judgment and patient's judgment of the pain. So they need to be allowed to use opioids. The answer is to not outlaw any medication.
Well, isn't that what they do now?
Yeah. But the whole point is they need better training.
100%.
So number two, and that's number two, we need their judgment to be good. So then the next piece of it is we need to do two things. We need to provide evidence-based addiction treatment that's affordable and acceptable for people who are wanting to get off. We need to have that treatment available to people.
That's just a more succinct way of what I'm trying to say.
And then number two, those people that are suffering from addiction that are not ready to get off of it, we need to keep them alive using harm reduction measures to keep them alive until they're ready to get off of it. And so some of these harm reduction measures are things like needle exchanges, because if you're sharing needles, then not only are you having, you know, this addiction, but then you're have all these like bloodborne epidemics that are going to happen, like HIV and hepatitis and whatever else. And so not only that, in Vancouver, they actually have a place where you can go and safely inject. And so they have clinicians there that will watch for overdose. In these, they'll give you needles, they'll give you whatever. And then it's also, there's that information is there if you want to get off. We have the information to help you get off of this medication. Not only that, you can test your drug to see what's in it, to make sure
at these clinics.
Yeah, to make sure it's not laced with fentanyl. So, and that's in Vancouver, but it's like more of those places need to be open.
But Vancouver seems to be deteriorating quite rapidly here in Canada. So
I don't know. But then
my question is like, how well is it working? Because all these things are good in theory, but like, how's that addressing the criminal portion of this, right? Like if you're just going to get people to take drugs or whatever, like, is it just something that just needs to be phased out, where like we have to figure out how as a society we can get people to not get addicted, to not take these drugs, and people that are addicted, give them the help they need. But there's got to be some rope, because I've seen some posters on Instagram where it's like, it's almost like saying like not that it's okay, but almost like don't heroin, yes, no problem, like it's normal almost. You know, like it's like you don't want to normalize it to the point where like not saying like, hey, well, you do have a problem, you need to get off of this. But at least in the meantime, here's the safe way of doing it. It's
really complex, and like this is where he argues that there's basically three epidemics that are happening. And so the first one is the one like his story, right? It's not him being in a bad situation. Right. It's just having a trauma and then not having.
That sounds like the low-hanging fruit of how you can solve this type of problem, because you're saying all that the Appalachian Belt of those people that are all addicted, that should not have ever have happened.
No,
with more educated doctors.
But then what happens though, and so then the other one obviously is just you have the criminal element, you have the people in really awful situations that are just turning to it to numb themselves. And so you have that one. But then what happens is because of the opioid epidemic was coming out, the CDC came out with all these prescribing regulations and told doctors to stop prescribing it. And so again, like he's talking about that pendulum at the beginning that's swinging back and forth. But what happens
there's no happy medium.
But then what happens is these people, the doctors are refusing to, like him, they're refusing to write them any more opioid prescriptions.
And then where do they go? They go onto the streets. And then where do they go? They get shit that's laced with fentanyl or whatever. And that's what's
happening. So then you have those two epidemics colliding to make this third bigger one. Yeah. So that's the problem with it.
What is it with medicine of being like this one size fits all? Yeah. Like it seems like it's always how it is. Let's say, there's a pandemic. Every single person in the world has to get this drug and it's going to be the same for everybody. Like that's not how things work. Yeah. And then like opioids. Nobody can have them anymore ever. Yeah. Like I know. What's going on? Yeah. What's going on with the world? Yeah. My goodness.
So then
in the middle, just people are dying. And it's like everything's just like this big political thing.
So what is also really interesting is there's lots of studies that are starting to come out that are talking about alternatives to using opioids for different types of situations. And so they've done studies showing that for things, I forget what it was. It was one study showing that it was really just Tylenol and Advil were really effective for pain relief for that type of like traumatic injury or surgical procedure. For joint replacements, like if you're getting like a knee or a hip replaced, it wasn't as effective, but they were comparing them, and Advil and Tylenol was just as effective for pain relief. And
it's
even
acetaminophen and ibuprofen, right?
Yeah. And that's the one thing I was really surprised by when I had the C-sections, is I was like, you're really only giving me Advil and Tylenol? Like, I just had fucking major surgery.
No, you're fine.
This is it, really? And yeah, it was fine. I was totally pain-free. And even even when I went off of it, like, I did not have a lot of pain. So that was really interesting. The other thing is
maybe it's not as major as your whole foot getting crushed and
well, no. Well, it's still considered major surgery.
I know that.
So, but what he was saying though is he was talking to a group of anesthesiologists, and they were after he gave his talk, they were talking about post-operative care, and he was saying, well, at one point they gave me, it was IV acetaminophen, and he said it really, really helped. It really took the edge off, but he was like, I was only allowed 3 doses of it. So like, why was I only allowed 3 doses of it? And so all of the anesthesiologists kind of laughed, and they're like, yeah, because it's really, really expensive. It's really expensive.
Really? Oh, for the IV version?
For the IV version. And
really? It's even off brand or off patent?
This one wasn't.
And
so that's what they said. They said, as soon as it's off patent, it'll be standard of care, which is bullshit, because it should be standard of care right now, regardless of cost.
Wow.
It makes me so fucking furious to think that. So I thought. But
again, acetaminophen, like I was saying earlier, I mean, that stuff, it's still dangerous. Like
people huge liver issues.
Yeah, isn't Tylenol or Advil, or maybe combination both, like almost the leading death in terms of like
overdose?
over the counter like medication?
I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, because people just think that it's over the counter. It's I'll just pop them like Tic Tacs. Like oh no.
Yeah.
no.
Yeah. So the other thing is he also visits a military facility, and obviously, like within the military, there's so many traumatic injuries.
Just think of back in the day when there's like crazy wars with like people like sword fighting all the time, like
I know,
getting their limbs cut off and whatever.
I know. So they're doing tons of research on pain, and they're even doing things like acupuncture right on the battlefield. And like, even when he was there, they inserted like this it was a really teeny tiny acupuncture pin in his ear, and even he felt pain reduction, because he still is going to have chronic pain for the rest of his life.
This guy with a foot?
Yeah, he still felt like pain relief, and he's like, I don't know if it was placebo or whatever, but
that's what we're talking about, brain, in the head, right?
Yes,
how much is in the head?
Exactly. So but what they've come up with is they've come up with a revised pain scale that links the intensity of pain with 4 other considerations: activity, stress, mood, and sleep. And so each of these functional and overall well-being considerations is ranked, and the overall pain rating reflects not just the pain intensity, but then how that pain is affecting your daily living as well, which seems more appropriate to me to have it. And like what he says, we're too obsessed with just getting pain to 0, and it's just like, it's like a COVID-19 like zero COVID response. It's unreasonable. You're never going to get it to 0, right? Especially like with him, if it's a traumatic injury, he's going to have chronic pain.
It's just about getting it to a place where you can manage your day-to-day life.
Yeah, and like he says, we need to foster a different relationship with pain and come up to a more careful understanding of what we can live with and like what we can't. And even he said too, like, if he had been prepared, if he had even just had more understanding and information about the pain and the medication, he would have been better prepared for those withdrawal experience.
But it's funny, like even a doctor and a bioethicist, like somebody like that who, their life is bound in education. Yeah. Like, even if they could succumb to that, what about just somebody, so many people.
He talks about that quite a bit.
Yeah. Like people just trust the doctors, and, you're actually looking out for my best interest. And I mean, most of the doctors are looking for the best interest, but they don't know any of the stuff about them having an agenda, how the pharmaceutical company works, what the relationship is like, what happens afterwards. And like, and if like, highly educated people are getting, falling into this trap.
Well, not only that, but like
a lot of other people.
But like when he gave that talk within his own department, one of the other people were like, "Why didn't you come to us? Like, you work at fucking Johns Hopkins. Like, we're a world-class hospital. Like, why didn't you come and talk to us?" And his point of the question was, if you can't even come and talk to us, and you have all of this knowledge and all of these resources, like, what about just like the average person, right? They're even in a worse position than you way worse. But it's because, it's also like that stigma that's attached to it, even though he wasn't in the throes of an addiction. It was this physiological dependency. So, but the reason why this book was so compelling to me was because he sees the problem. And I don't know if the other books on the opioid epidemic give solutions, but what I like is he's giving like very concrete solutions and a very concrete way forward of how we work this problem. Yeah. And that's what I loved about it is he went through this horrible accident, this horrible then withdrawal symptoms and all of this stuff. And then he's going to use it to try and help other people and try and find a way forward. And so for me, it's just like with the virus one that we did, the bacteriophages. Right. It's just like that one, right? It's like she's trying to advance this new therapy to help others. Right. And he's doing the same thing, using his experience to try and help others through this huge epidemic that we're having right now. Yeah. So that's what I loved about this book. Yeah. And it was. Yeah.
It would be really like a follow-up at some point to figure out what's going on in Vancouver and with these injection clinics and like looking at studies to see what effect it's actually having, right? Yeah. Like, is it helping people get off of it? Is it helping with crime? Because they're not actually purchasing heroin for them or giving them heroin.
They bring their own.
Yeah, you got to. So you still have to figure out how to get your own. So is that gonna help solve that crime problem?
Yeah, he talks about that. He talks about possibly like providing like heroin for people. I'm not sure in what kind of capacity, but then at least it's like pure medical grade and you're not having to deal. And then you're cutting crime out of it.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Like if, you look at like the cartels or whatever, if like, their whole job is pushing, heroin or whatever. Yeah. It's like, well, what if you just take heroin off the market? Well, and that's it. I mean, someone's still got to pay for it or whatever, right? So there's still that aspect of it. But, like why are there not very many, bootleggers anymore? Well, it's because you can just go get your liquor at the liquor store. Yeah. You don't have to commit illegal acts and there's not people shooting each other, for territory of who's going to sell the, the moonshine.
Well, and not only that, but like, I know we talked about fentanyl and how it's 100 times more.
Like whatever. Yeah. More potent.
Yeah. So, but then you also have, there's another one now called carfentanil that they're putting in, and it's, I think, 10,000 times.
Who's they? And they're putting in what? This is what I don't understand.
So they're putting it in, so it's the cartels. And so, again, this is another, so the Shawn Ryan show, he talks a lot with these.
Shawn Ryan.
Was a former SEAL and CIA contractor. Of course he is.
And he or she?
He, okay.
And
so he talks to a lot of these people that have worked down in Mexico who have seen the inner workings. One is a journalist, one was a police officer. And so it's the Chinese come into Mexico. They're showing these people how to cut these drugs with fentanyl, carfentanil. And now I think there's even another one that they're talking about that's even stronger than carfentanil, which is 10,000 times stronger than heroin.
So I guess because if they've cracked
than morphine,
the code, I guess, in terms of how to what compounds it is that they're creating.
Yeah, and so you can get really conspiracy theorist on it, and you can be like, well, is China doing this on purpose to, undermine the society here? I don't know, but why are they there? Why are they helping the cartels?
But why are the cartels putting stuff in that's going to kill your clients?
I don't know if it's to kill, but I think it's also to just super keep them addicted.
Even more like, it's like,
how much more addicted do you need these people?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know. So, I don't know. So, but anyways, yeah.
That's all. This is a whole another story because we could talk about the cartels and the fucking border policies at the United States and how that is a big problem. And it's like, again, how everything gets so political. It's like, you have Donald Trump, like, because it's all build a wall. And it's like, no, who's going to fucking pay for the wall? And everyone's like, this is so stupid. Blah, blah. It's like, it tries to simplify everything, right? And then Joe Biden's policies is just like, fucking everyone just kind of come over. You heard about the 50 people that died in the car, whatever?
More than 50.
Yeah. So, and it's just like, there's a reason why you need to protect your borders and not just have people coming in. And most of the people that are benefiting from these are the cartels. And it's all political. everything's made political.
Yep.
It's like, well, you make this political, and then at the end, what's happening is just people are dying.
Yep.
People are dying because the actual roots of the problems are, number one, not being discussed, and they're not even being, nothing is being done about it. So that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this stuff has to do with drugs.
Yep.
And opioids is a really big thing right now.
Yeah.
But I would like to know more about the actual crisis, because I don't know very much about it. You know, you hear about it. You hear about things here in Canada, like in reserves and all these places where people are overdosing, and people don't give a shit. It's like, it seems like no one gives a shit. And,
because I think that's the thing, is I think there's people aren't treating it as a health issue. They're treating it as a criminal issue. Yeah. And I think like, there's no, they don't see it as, it's also like a mental health issue. Like, not just like a physiological, like not just bodily, but also mentally. Like, why are these people, do they have the resources around them to help them get off if they're on it because of a surgery or something like that? It would be really good to know, of like all the people that are addicted to opioids, how many of them are addicted just because they are taking them as a street drug versus how many people took them because they had a surgery or they had some whatever and they were prescribed it and now they're addicted. Yep. I'd be surprised. I think it's, I don't know. I think would be pretty high in terms of how many people got prescribed stuff and they were addicted and then they have to get it on the streets now. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, and that's a big problem. Lot. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I forgot to add when we were talking about doctors' responsibility, is I remember when I was working in the pharmacy and there was a big thing that came out, which was just like, oh, we have these new labels that we have to put on the bottles for the opioid medications, the pain reliever medications. And so even those medications, when we dispensed them, like they are kept in a safe, and so it was a big deal to how controlled they were. And so I remember being so pissed off even back then, because I was like, you want to put this label on for the patient. And I'm like, fuck you, because it's not the patient. It is the doctor that needs to be responsibly prescribing these things. And I remember a lady came in. And so at the pharmacy, if you have an outdated, like an expired medication or a medication you no longer need, you bring it into the pharmacy and then we dispose of it. And so like an old, like pills, and you have them. Yeah. Whatever medication it is. It can just be even off the counter stuff. It doesn't matter. Whatever you have, you can bring it into the pharmacy. It'll be disposed of. Why do that when you can sell it on the streets for money? So there was one woman, she came in and she had it was like a full bottle of opioids. And so it had to have been like 60 pills in there. Jesus. And she's just like, this is ridiculous. She's like, this is what the doctor prescribed me for. I forget what it was. It was like a minor like surgery or something like this. She's like, this is what he prescribed me. I didn't take one of these. This is ridiculous. This is what's driving this issue. Yeah. And so she brought it in, obviously, because she didn't take it. But it's like, why are you yelling at them? Like, that's like the pharmacist. Like, no, she wasn't. No, she wasn't. She was just like, no, it was to me, because I was the one that took it in. Yeah. So, but she was just like just astounded by. Yeah. Well, how did she get the prescription in the first place? I think did she didn't see it when she. No, I think that was just the prescription. I think she just got it just in case, like she was in that much pain. Yeah. So. Yeah. But still. So I definitely think it starts at better educating the physicians about how to prescribe it, number one, and then have a plan to get people so off. So there's still prescribing here in Canada then, I imagine. Oh, of course. Right? Of course. Yeah. 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 So crazy. Yeah. So 1 to 10 in terms of a book, how good is it? For me, it was a 9. Right. For other people, it might be a little bit dry, but like that, this is just what I'm into. Yeah. Hey, I'm asking you to rate it for you, right? So I'm not asking you, what do you think other people would rate the book? Yeah. No. I know, but I'm just saying for other people. This is your jam. Yes, my jam. The biology, science kind of angle. Yeah. Yeah. But again, still, it could still be a good story for other people. Yeah. I thought it was really good. I thought it explained like really well the history and why we are where we are and the responsibility. And it's not just like, oh, this happened to me, I'm just gonna bitch about it, because I fucking hate that. But it's just like, this is what we need to do to move forward. And that's what I loved about it. Yeah. And I mean, in terms of, obviously it's not like, what do we want to do? Do we want to do this or not?
But yes, I still want to get a motorcycle. So I'll say that.
No.
Yeah. You just
I'll let you read the part of. Oh my
No,
God.
I heard it. I was all screaming the whole time.
Yes, I know. It's awful.
But I mean, a motorcycle. I still want a motorcycle. But I think it's a good lesson to keep in mind of whenever we do go, if we're going to the hospital or whatever, and we do get any kind of medication, to really, really think about what it is that the doctor prescribed, and just almost assume that the doctor doesn't know what the hell he's doing, and do our own research and like think about what the drugs are.
Talk to your pharmacist.
Talk to the pharmacist for sure. Say like, this is what the doctor prescribed.
Yes.
What do you think? I
have so many horror stories from the pharmacy.
Oh yeah.
About doctors and how badly they prescribe. There was a call, more than once a day to get a prescription changed because it was not written
not the
properly.
right thing. Yep.
No.
So that's a huge problem.
And pharmacists, that's their job. That's what they know. So ask them 100%. And I think it just shows about you have to be or have someone. Obviously, for him, you're in that much pain. You cannot advocate for yourself. You have to advocate for yourself or have someone that can for you.
But that's just a problem. It's so hard, especially if something acute that happens where like you just have to go to the hospital because something crazy happened, and then you're like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Here's a prescription. It's like you don't even have time to like, oh well, I won't take this. I'm going to do like 48 hours of research. So that's where
it's tough.
It's one of those things where like astronauts or Chris Hadfield or whatever. It's like you almost have to do your preparations beforehand, so that when you do get into a situation, and that's just life training for life, I guess. But at least this is a good first start, I think, of just being aware. Be aware of what's out there, what the dangers are, of what you might be taking, and just do quick. We're so lucky nowadays. Like you're at the doctor's office, whip out the phone. It's like, oh, he wants to prescribe this. Just do a quick read of what it is, what the side effects are, all that kind of stuff. And think if it's the best thing for you, and think like, do I really need this? And weigh the pros and cons with what is actually happening with you versus what could even potentially happen. Because oftentimes I think the drugs are worse than the actual disease or what have you. So definitely. That could be another thing of what's going on today. Drugs being worse than disease, but that's a whole other question that I'm sure we're not even allowed to talk about.
Sure aren't.
But
anyway,
that ain't gonna stop me anyways. So we'll figure that out some other time.
Yes.
But anyways, everyone just do whatever you got to do.
Yep.
And with that, what we got to do is wrap this up.
Indeed.
So anything else? Any final thoughts? I think we nailed it all.
I think we did. Yeah.
So you want to do a little up top?
Hold on.
We gotta get.
I gotta get situated.
We're fine. We're close enough that you can do this. There you go.
Yeah, crisp high five.
There you go. It was crisp. It was tight.
It was
a magnifique. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, tuning in. Check us out, odumandandrea.com. We have, we have our podcast on there.
Yeah.
And there's nothing else.
No, next week it'll be a little lighter.
It'll be a little lighter. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is still good, though. It's not, it is a little bit tough, I guess, at some points.
But it'll be later next week. It'll be fun.
You should put the warnings at the start, not at the very end. You listen to this. So sorry to depress you this whole time, hour and a half or whatever. Okay. Well, I'll look forward to it.
Sweet.
Until then.
Have a good week.
You got it.